Imagine working with someone who thinks the entire office runs because of them. A receptionist who glares if you're 2 minutes late, delays your work out of spite, and worst of all, hoards every last piece of candy meant for everyone. But when she tried to ruin my career, I found the sweetest revenge imaginable. If you've ever had to deal with a toxic coworker who thought they ruled the office, hit that subscribe button right now. Like this video if you've ever wished karma would strike back, and drop a comment sharing your worst office story, because today's tale is about justice served sweeter than a Snickers bar. When I first joined that small business, I thought I'd landed a comfortable, straightforward job. We weren't some huge corporation with endless cubicles and faceless employees. No, we were a modest team. About 10 of us worked inside the office, 4 more managed the shop out back, and around 50 others were spread out in the field, tackling different projects. It was the kind of workplace where everyone knew everyone, for better or worse. My role was clear. I handled accounting and payroll. Numbers were my territory, and I liked it that way, clean, orderly, and logical. I had 2 people under me, and I reported directly to the owner himself. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and I took pride in being the person who made sure everyone's paychecks came out right, bills were settled, and taxes were squared away. But it didn't take me long to notice something off about the office dynamic. The receptionist, let's call her Karen, wasn't just a receptionist. Oh no, she was something far more self-appointed. The queen bee of the office. At least, that's what she seemed to think. On paper, her job was simple. She answered phones, greeted visitors, handled small errands for the owner and his wife. Things like picking up their dog from the groomer. You'd think it would have been a low-drama role. But Karen carried herself like she was sitting on a throne, ruling over the rest of us. She'd been there since the beginning of the company, and she wielded that fact like a weapon. Her attitude was practically dripping with, "I was here first. This is my kingdom." The first time I saw it, I brushed it off. Someone came in 2 minutes late one morning, barely enough time to shake off traffic. Karen's reaction? A raised eyebrow so sharp it could have cut glass, followed by a dramatic lift of her arm and exaggerated tapping on her watch. She didn't have the authority to reprimand anyone, but she didn't need words. Her face said it all. "You're beneath me. I noticed. And I'll make sure you know I noticed." And it didn't stop there. Whenever the owner asked her to pass along something he wanted me to do, she wouldn't just come into my office politely. No, she'd strut in with a smug little smirk, as if she were laying down the law. Her tone always carried that subtle edge of superiority, like she was the one in charge, not me. It was a power trip, plain and simple. And if you weren't in her good graces, God help you. Suddenly, packages you needed sent out wouldn't make it to FedEx on time. Appointments you asked her to schedule mysteriously got pushed back. The office supplies you requested took forever to appear. Things that should have been routine suddenly became a waiting game if you fell on Karen's bad side. At first, I tried not to let it get under my skin. I figured, hey, every workplace has that person, right? The one who thinks they run the show but really doesn't. I told myself to roll with it. But the truth is, it got old. Fast. And even though none of us said it out loud, I could tell my coworkers felt it too. Instead of putting up with her roadblocks, most of us just started bypassing her altogether. Need office supplies? Order them yourself. Need something mailed? Just take it to the post office. It was less stressful than dealing with her attitude. Karen might have thought she was untouchable, but little by little, the rest of us were quietly cutting her out of the equation. And while she strutted around with her imaginary crown, the resentment grew. I didn't know it yet, but her little power trip was only the beginning. And soon, I'd have front row seats to the unraveling of her so-called reign. The more time I spent in that office, the more Karen's behavior revealed itself. It wasn't just the occasional raised eyebrow, or the smug little smirk. It was a pattern. A deliberate, exhausting performance she put on every single day to remind everyone who she thought was in charge. She acted like the owner's history with her gave her special privileges. She wasn't just a receptionist in her own eyes. She was a gatekeeper, the first and last line of defense between the boss and the rest of us. And she used that position like a weapon. If someone showed up a couple minutes late, she would stop mid-conversation, stare them down, and make a grand display of looking at her watch. Sometimes she would even sigh dramatically, loud enough for the whole office to hear, as though she were personally carrying the weight of everyone else's mistakes. I'll never forget one morning when one of the shop guys came in late because his kid had been sick the night before. He was pale and exhausted, clearly running on no sleep. As he passed Karen's desk, she tilted her head, raised her eyebrows, and said with fake sweetness, "Rough morning? You know, the clock doesn't wait for anyone." The poor guy just muttered something under his breath and kept walking, but I could see the humiliation in his face. That was Karen's game. She never outright broke rules or said anything so harsh she could get in trouble. Instead, she lived in that gray area. Death by 1,000 cuts. Little digs, little smirks, tiny moments designed to remind you that she was watching. That she was in her mind superior. And it wasn't just about time. Whenever the owner wanted something from me, say, a report or a payroll update, he'd sometimes ask Karen to let me know. Fair enough, that was part of her job. But Karen never just walked in and relayed the message. Oh no. She'd stroll into my office with this smug grin plastered across her face and say something like, "The boss wants you to handle this right away. I guess it must be important." Her tone made it sound less like a request from the owner and more like she was issuing the orders, like she had authority over me. At first, I'd just nod and get back to work. But inside, I could feel it building, the irritation, the quiet anger at her little charade. She wanted power she didn't have. And the worst part? She believed she deserved it. Then there were the tasks she conveniently delayed for people she didn't like. Packages that should have gone out the same day mysteriously stayed on her desk for 2. Appointments that needed to be booked somehow slipped her mind. Office supplies took weeks to arrive when it should have been days. It was like a game to her. The moment she decided you weren't worthy of her fake smile, you were on her invisible blacklist. And once you were there, good luck getting anything done without doing it yourself. That's what most of us ended up doing anyway. Need something mailed? Drive it to FedEx yourself. Need office supplies? Place the order on your own credit card and get reimbursed later. Need to schedule something? Just call directly instead of waiting for her. It wasn't efficient, and it definitely wasn't fair, but it was easier than dealing with her passive-aggressive nonsense. Over time, though, something strange started happening. Instead of looking at her as the gatekeeper she wanted to be, most of us just started ignoring her completely. She wanted to be the queen bee, but little by little, people were cutting her out of the hive. Still, Karen carried on like she was untouchable. Like she had the owner's ear in a way none of us did. And maybe, in a way, that's what kept her inflated. She really believed she was indispensable. What she didn't realize was that her little kingdom was built on sand. And all it was going to take was one wave, one mistake, for it to crumble. One of the few things that kept morale afloat in that office was the owner's habit of bringing back little treats from Costco. Every couple of weeks, he'd stop by during errands and return with a big box of granola bars, cookies, or candy bars. Nothing extravagant, just small pick-me-ups for everyone to enjoy during the workday. It was one of those small gestures that reminded us that the boss cared. He didn't have to do it, but he did, and it made the office feel a little more human. I remember the first time he brought in a massive box of Snickers bars. He set it down in the kitchen with a smile and said something like, "Help yourselves, everyone. Just one each so it lasts all right." Simple. Fair. A nice little perk of the job. But before anyone else could even stretch their legs toward the kitchen, I saw her. Karen. Her eyes lit up like a kid on Halloween night spotting a full-size candy bar house. She practically sprung out of her chair, a bounce in her step that you'd never see when she was actually working. She made a beeline for the kitchen, and when she passed my office, I couldn't help but notice her hands. She wasn't carrying one candy bar. Not even 2. She had an entire stack of them, clutched tightly against her chest like treasure she was smuggling out of a vault. I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. I figured maybe she was just getting a couple extras for later. No big deal. But later that day, Kevin, one of the shop guys, came in for some paperwork. I mentioned the candy in the kitchen, telling him, "Hey, grab a Snickers before you head out. There should still be some left." Kevin chuckled, shaking his head. "Does Karen know about them? If she does, there won't be any left." That caught my attention. What do you mean? I asked. He smirked and leaned against my doorway. Every time the boss brings snacks in, she grabs a bunch and hides them in her desk. You'll see. Give it a couple hours, box will be empty. Curious, I went to the kitchen later that afternoon. Sure enough, out of a box that must have had 30 candy bars, only one lonely Snickers sat there, almost mocking me. It wasn't just greed, it was deliberate. She wasn't taking one or two extras. She was hoarding, sneaking them away so no one else could have them. And for what? Some kind of twisted sense of entitlement? A belief that she deserved more than the rest of us? At first, I rolled my eyes. Candy bars weren't worth fighting over. I had bigger responsibilities, taxes, payroll, keeping the business compliant. Who cared if she wanted to bury herself in chocolate? But as weeks passed, the pattern repeated itself. New box of treats? Gone within a day. Karen would practically sprint to the kitchen, scoop up an armful, and stash them away. Sometimes, if you walked by her desk, you could hear the faint crinkle of wrappers coming from her drawer. It became a running joke in the office. Better get a candy bar before Karen sniffs it out, someone would say. But underneath the humor, there was irritation. The owner bought those snacks for everyone, not for one person's private stash. Still, I let it slide. Candy was candy. I wasn't about to start a war over chocolate. What I didn't realize at the time, though, was that this little habit of hers, the petty greed, the need to take more than she deserved, was a glimpse into something bigger, something nastier. Because when Karen's hunger for control turned from candy bars to my career, that's when the game truly changed. Over time, Karen's candy hoarding stopped being shocking. It became routine, predictable. The owner would come in smiling with another box of treats from Costco. He'd set it down in the kitchen with his usual cheerful reminder. All right, everyone, help yourselves. Just one apiece so it lasts. And like clockwork, there she went. Karen practically skipping down the hallway, eyes locked on her prize. She'd grab handfuls, far more than anyone could eat in a day, and disappear back to her desk. We all noticed. We all joked about it. But no one called her out. In a strange way, it became part of the rhythm of the office. The same way you knew the coffee pot would be empty after lunch or that the copier would jam on the one day you were in a rush, you also knew that if snacks showed up, they'd vanish into Karen's desk drawer. It was annoying, sure. Unfair, absolutely. But in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't worth a fight. We had real jobs to focus on. I was busy juggling payroll deadlines, tax filings, and endless spreadsheets. Others were buried in field reports and invoices. Compared to all that, Karen's candy obsession felt like background static. And I told myself the same thing every time. Who really cares? But what I didn't fully grasp at the time was that her behavior, her need to take more than she deserved, wasn't just about candy. It was a symptom, a clue to something deeper. Karen didn't just crave chocolate. She craved control. She wanted to feel special, untouchable. She wanted everyone else to believe she worked harder, mattered more, and deserved better. The candy was just her small, sweet kingdom. The real problem was when she decided to expand her territory. Because while I was content to ignore her stash of Snickers, I couldn't ignore what came next. One afternoon, months after the candy raids had become routine, the owner called me into his office. His tone was serious, his face unreadable. When I sat down, he slid a letter across the desk toward me. A tax penalty notice. My stomach dropped. This wasn't about candy anymore. This was about my work, my credibility, my entire role at the company. And in that moment, I realized something chilling. Karen's petty little games had just escalated into outright sabotage. By now, I had a full picture of how deep his betrayal went. Not only was he emotionally invested in her, but money had also started flowing from our joint account to his business trips. It wasn't hard to guess where that money was really going. I didn't rush my revenge. No, I wanted every piece to fall into place so that when I finally moved, his entire world would collapse like a house of cards. I quietly met with a lawyer, gathered bank statements, messages, photos, and recordings. My attorney told me that with this much proof, I could clean him out in divorce court. That wasn't enough for me, though. I didn't just want justice. I wanted humiliation. So I started planting seeds. Every time he lied about a meeting, I made sure his friends and family knew where he really was through subtle hints. I befriended the girl's co-workers online, dropping little concerns about her behavior. Slowly but surely, whispers began spreading. Meanwhile, I played the role of the loving, supportive wife. Dinner ready, smile on my face, never raising suspicion. He thought I was clueless. That was my greatest weapon, his arrogance. Because when the day came, he wouldn't just lose me. He'd lose everything. It didn't take long for the cracks in his carefully crafted lies to show. He had grown so comfortable thinking I was oblivious that he started getting sloppy. One night, he came home late, reeking of a perfume I didn't wear. He mumbled something about a business dinner, but I could see the faint smudge of lipstick on his collar. I pretended not to notice, offering him coffee with a smile, all while memorizing every detail for later. Another time, he slipped up in front of his mother. She asked how his trip to the city went, and he froze for a second too long. He had forgotten which lie he'd told me versus what he told her. I smoothly jumped in, covering for him, making him look good. Inside, though, I was laughing. He had no idea I was pulling strings behind the scenes. The whispers I had spread about his mistress were starting to reach her workplace. She was getting side eyes from colleagues, subtle questions she couldn't answer. The tension between them grew, and I watched from the shadows as their perfect little secret began to collapse. He was unraveling, and the best part? He still thought he was the smartest man in the room. The downfall began like a slow leak in a balloon, barely noticeable at first, but impossible to stop once it started. His mistress grew tired of living in the shadows. She started demanding more from him: time, money, attention. I could see the stress etched on his face every time she called when he was home. He'd rush to the balcony, whispering furiously, thinking I couldn't hear. But I was always listening. One night, during dinner with friends, she accidentally called him. Her name flashed across his phone screen in bold letters. He panicked, fumbling to silence it, but not before one of our friends noticed. The table went quiet for a split second too long. He forced a laugh, muttering something about a coworker, but I could feel the shift in the air. That was the moment the rumors started spreading. He didn't know it yet, but I had been planting seeds, feeding tiny pieces of information to people who loved gossip. A sly look here, a knowing comment there, and soon his secret wasn't so secret anymore. At work, whispers followed him down the hall. At family gatherings, people looked at me with pity, at him with disgust. His shiny image as the perfect husband was cracking. And the best part? I wasn't even done yet. The cracks in his double life grew wider when the mistress stopped playing the role of silent lover. At first, she was content with the gifts, the dinners, and the stolen hours. But soon she wanted more, all of him. She began demanding that he leave me, telling him she was tired of being the secret. The irony made me smile. She thought she was in control, but she had no idea that she was just another pawn in my game. Late one night, I overheard their argument over the phone. Her voice was sharp, filled with fury. "You promised me. You said you'd leave her by now. Do you think I'll wait forever?" He tried to calm her down, whispering like a man drowning, but she wasn't having it. And when he didn't meet her demands, she decided to punish him. She started sending him texts at the worst possible times. When he was with friends, when he was with family, when he was at work. She even showed up outside his office once, causing a scene. His colleagues saw. His boss saw. His carefully crafted reputation was crumbling. The mistress thought she was hurting me, but she was destroying him. And the sweetest part? I was feeding her fire. A few anonymous messages from me, disguised of course, hinting that he would never leave me, that he was stringing her along, that he laughed about her behind her back. She believed every word. By the time I was done, she wasn't just angry. She was vengeful. And she turned all her fury directly at him. The storm I had been waiting for finally arrived. The mistress, furious and humiliated, decided she wasn't going to be his secret anymore. And she chose the most brutal way to expose him, by dragging his double life into the light where everyone could see. One Sunday morning, while he sat across from me at the breakfast table pretending everything was fine, his phone buzzed nonstop. He looked pale, almost sick. I knew before he did. She had sent the evidence. Screenshots. pictures, voice messages. Not just to him. Not just to me. She sent them to his friends, family, and even his co-workers. Within minutes, my phone was buzzing too. My sister, my cousin, even my mother were calling me, their voices filled with shock. Is this true? Did he really do this? The man who always prided himself on being respected, admired, and untouchable, was suddenly the subject of gossip and disgust. His phone rang, and this time it was his boss. He stepped outside, but I heard enough. The company couldn't have someone with that kind of reputation representing them. He was suspended, possibly fired. When he came back inside, his face was white, his hands shaking. He tried to spin it, tried to blame the mistress, tried to act like he was the victim. But for the first time, I didn't even have to lift a finger. The mistress had already done the damage for me. And all I did was sit back, sip my tea, and say, "Looks like your little secret doesn't want to be so secret anymore." The look on his face, pure desperation. And it was only the beginning. By now, his world was collapsing. The mistress had exposed him. His job was on the line. His family wouldn't even pick up his calls. But I wasn't done. I had been quietly preparing my escape for months, collecting every bank record, every financial slip, every proof of his infidelity. While he thought I was still his dutiful wife, I was already 3 steps ahead. The day he came home, begging me to forgive him, saying, "We can fix this, just give me another chance," I smiled sweetly and handed him divorce papers. Not just any divorce papers. Ones that secured me the house, half his savings, and full custody of the kids. He had no leverage left. With his reputation in ruins, he couldn't fight me in court. His mistress had abandoned him too, moving on to someone richer. His friends? Gone. His job? Terminated. His family? Ashamed. And me? I walked away with my head held high, free of the man who once thought he could destroy me. The last time I saw him, he was sitting in his car outside our old house, looking broken, older, and completely defeated. I didn't roll down the window. I didn't even say a word. Because my silence was the loudest revenge of all. She thought she was powerless. But in the end, she took everything. Her dignity. Her freedom. Her revenge. Would you have done the same?